Today, we're going to see how many different adjectives one person can use to describe what just happened to the Detroit Tigers over opening weekend. That's going to be most of the show. Just how many different adjectives can are synonyms for like awful and terrible. So let's find out. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, April 3rd, 2023. Thank you for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Check out the Ultimate Baseball GM. That's the sponsor of today's episode. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an MLB GM, maybe of the Tigers because you think you're better than what we've had to deal with over the last 7 years, then this is the game for you. Download the game, visit ultimatebaseballgm.com or look it up in app stores. Our listeners get 100% free boosts to their franchise when using promo code LOCKEDON in the game. Okay, we're back. I hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. If you did, it wasn't because your baseball team did well. So I hope that you had a great weekend in spite of the just horrible performance that was displayed by the Detroit Tigers over the weekend. I mean, as I said in the cold open, I genuinely, I think I'm just going to go and we're just going to see how many different ways you can say bad. We've already knocked out like 3 or 4, to be honest with you. I'd imagine we can get to a pretty high number if we keep track here. We'd have like a tracker, like a ticker in the corner, just goes up one by one. That was awful. I mean that was horrific. That was truly an awful weekend. Pretty pathetic performances, to be honest with you, in all 3 games. We already talked about opening day. So if you missed that one, Friday's episode is recapping opening day. But so we'll only talk about 2 games. We have the pleasure of only talking about 2 of the 3 games. But that was really bad. If you were trying to find a way to take any remote optimism out of an entire city and fan base within 3 games, this was kind of the exact way to do it. It's like honestly impressive how many boxes they like checked off. If that was your goal, like you got shut out in game one after getting shut out at a historic pace last year. You lost by 10 at one point. You almost got no hit in the finale. You scored 3 runs in 3 games. I don't know. I just like, I'm not sure you could have done a better job if you tried at like, hey, we're going to go in there in 3 games and we want no one to be optimistic about the team anymore. I think this is like the prototype. This is the exact way you would do that. It was bad though, for real. That was not good. And people are upset, rightfully so. I mean, I'm not too happy, if you couldn't tell. That was dreadful to watch. After what the fans had to sit through all of last year, all of the last 7 years, I guess. This is not exactly the like injection of optimism that everyone wanted to kick off the season, right? I said that this team would win 74 games. That was my prediction just a mere days ago. I know that that's an improvement over last year, but that's still like not good. The Diamondbacks won 74 games last year. Like this year's the year the Diamondbacks, everybody's like, oh, maybe the Diamondbacks will be good. Like last year's D-backs team without any, or with a lot less, I should say, of the fun prospects on it, that team was a 74-win team. In a division with the Padres and Dodgers in it, by the way. Most years, 74 and 88 is in like the bottom third of baseball. That is a bottom 10 team in the sport. You have a single-digit number draft pick. Most years. 74, that was also the optimistic side of things. Like I Locked On Tigers, the Twitter account, put out a tweet that said, give your season predictions and whatnot. And my 74 was it was one of the higher win totals, which is like baffling to me because it's still, again, 74 wins. That's not a good season. And that was one of the more optimistic ones. Most people had somewhere in that like 69 to 72 range. It's also not good. Am I going to change my season outlook after a weekend or my season prediction or whatever? No. Because the fact of the matter is we do have 159 games left. I'm not trying to be like cliche or make you feel better about it. I'm just as upset as you are, but I can't do that. Like I can't just change my opinion of the season 3 games in. But and I guess on top of that, thankfully, we will not have to face the Tampa Bay Rays rotation for the next 159 games. That's always a good sign. And one of the best bullpens in baseball for another 159 games. That's good. We're going to win at some point. We're going to score runs. Last year's team had a 14-run game or something at some point. But we are definitely seeing the results firsthand, right off rip, of one of the worst offenses ever not adding anything of remote substance over the offseason. That's what we're seeing. And we explained why. I explained why and what I thought the thought process was behind doing so a million times this offseason. I'm not here to say right or wrong, logical, illogical, whether you're a believer or not a believer. I'm not trying to point you any direction. I'm just saying we did explain why. And early on, we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing the fruits of that labor. We're seeing ineptitude offensively yet again. The anger is justified. This is unbelievably frustrating. And like, as I said earlier, the worst possible start to a season, maybe, that you could have drawn up. I'm also really tired of having to say at the beginning of every season, hey, everyone, it's just April, or we're only 3 games in, or there's 159 games left. I'm tired of that conversation. And this year, it doesn't make any sense, really. Well, not it doesn't make sense, but this year, it's I don't know, even worse, maybe, because I don't know if you've seen the Tigers' April schedule, but it doesn't get easier. It might get harder. Let's just go through the April schedule, okay? So you open with Tampa, then you have at Houston for the next 3 days. Boston, Toronto, San Francisco, Cleveland, Baltimore, Milwaukee, Baltimore. That's your April. That is a gauntlet. Then to start off May, you have the Mets, Cardinals, Guardians, and Mariners. That is your first 6 weeks. That takes you to May 16th when you place the Pirates and the Nationals and the Royals. And then you start playing some bad teams. The first 6 weeks, you have a gauntlet. People are tired of the same spiel every April. And unfortunately, I can't tell you that this one is going to be different or that you're going to get a different spiel. I've already said it. I literally already regurgitated the 159 games left thing. I already said that in this episode. I personally, I kind of chalked up the first 6 weeks as like, this is probably not going to go very well. We talked about the schedule in the spring. We talked about how brutal the beginning of the season was going to be. And then after the season was already a lost cause and there was no optimism, then maybe they can string some wins together against some bad teams or middle of the pack teams and claw their way to a 70-win season. Claw their way out of a hole they dig themselves in April literally every single year and get to 70 wins. So the Tigers are 0-3. They've only scored 3 runs the entire season. Scored 3 runs all weekend. And at the 3rd game mark, game number 3, we're already at the point of pessimism and we're met with the approach of like, you'll have to prove me wrong type of vibe involving like in-season expectations. And it's been like this for a while, a long while, years, over half a decade. Really, this is all to say, like the short version of all this is there a lot of baseball left? Yes. There is a ton of baseball left against a lot worse teams than the Tampa Bay Rays. Is this series in a vacuum the end of the world? No, it's absolutely not. But after a worst case scenario season that we all agreed was the worst case scenario season last year, we have now started 2023 with a worst case scenario start. And that sucks. All right, let's talk about these games, performances, and whatnot, and we'll try to tamper anger as best we can. All right. But first, we got to tell y'all about our friends over at the Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. As I said earlier, this is one of the coolest games like I've ever played. Genuinely, I've spent an embarrassing amount of time playing it, to be honest with you, because I've always thought that I could be a great Major League general manager. And I would imagine that if you're here, most of you have had that thought at one point in your lives as well. And it turns out it's not all that easy, but you can test yourself. You can put your brains to the test at the Pro Baseball GM game. This game allows you to manage every strategical aspect of your franchise. You can play through seasons, leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty in a simulation you're completely responsible for, like hiring the right coaches, the right staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, manage it through difficult personalities, injuries, navigating your franchise through free agency, as we've talked about a lot in this show. All the ups and downs of the season, trade deadline, waivers, etc. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free and playable offline. So play on the go when you want, where you want. Locked On Tigers listeners are also getting a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com. Scan the code on the screen here if you're watching on YouTube, or you can just look it up in the app store. That is probaseballgm.com. It's the ultimate baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. So now that we got all that out of the way, we got the big picture stuff out of the way. Just not fun. Not fun at all. All the anger and frustration is completely justified. And it sucks. This is year 7 of this. And we already feel deflated 3 games into the season because so far nothing's changed. Right? Like that's where the frustration comes from. We have yet to see a changed product 3 games in. And again, a lot of ball left against a lot worse teams. But it really does tamper your optimism when a like wild card team makes you look like a minor league team off rip. Like the Rays are going to be a wild card team this year. They're going to be in that race. And they just absolutely embarrassed you for 3 games. That's it's not great. It's deflating. Okay? So let's talk about these games. We do have to break them down. I'm going to talk about each one on its own, I think, because that's easier in my head. Saturday was a 12-2 loss. Let's start with the pitching because that's the story in this one. Spencer Turnbull goes 2 1/3, 8 hits, 7 runs, 3 walks, and 3 Ks. I really went to bat for Spencer Turnbull this offseason and was trying to get a lot of people really hype about his return. If that didn't work, then you saved yourself some letdown. If it did work, I genuinely apologize because that was a really frustrating start. I think the reason that it was frustrating for me is because like the stuff was very clearly there. Like he still had 9 swings and misses in this outing, which in 2 1/3 innings is like not impressive. It's just like obviously the rest of it made it very much not impressive. And 3 strikeouts, like again, given the length of the outing, not bad. A lot of his outs were strikeouts, right? He only recorded 7 outs, almost half of them were Ks. But he had no clue where the ball was going. That's really what this comes down to. He threw the slider more than any other pitch in this outing and just never had command of the slider. And when you don't have command of the pitch you're throwing the most, it's not going to bode too terribly well. And it's not like he had great command of all the other pitches or else he just would have started throwing those. Like he just didn't have a feel on anything, just went with movement because he didn't have a feel on anything. And we got where we got, and we ended up where we ended up. And you know, to be completely honest, too, I mean, if we're dating ourselves back to pre-Tommy John Turnbull as well, this has always been the question mark. Always. Can he throw strikes? This is the first start back, and you're already seeing why I take spring with a big grain of salt. I try to say that a lot during spring training. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what his next start looks like, and we'll keep an eye on it for sure. But yeah, even pre TJ Turnbull, like the big question was if he can throw strikes, he's nasty. He's going to be incredible. But that's the big question. And we saw what happens when the command isn't great. The bullpen in this game, Trey Winginter makes an appearance. You can really just copy and paste a lot of what I just said about Turnbull into this one. Like, had pretty decent stuff, but also really had no clue where it was going. Just didn't have any feel for the strike zone. Tyler Alexander, 3 1/3, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, though. This is a pretty on-brand bullpen Tyler Alexander performance. Good strikeout total here, which, again, he tends to do decent, better when he's coming out of the pen than when he's a starter, I guess I'll say. But the Rays also take advantage of mistakes, and they certainly took advantage of his mistakes as well. And he left with a couple of walks and a couple of earned runs given up as well. Garrett Hill, 1 inning pitched, 1 hit, 2 earned runs, 2 walks. Good velo, 0 command. I don't know if you've stop me if you've heard this before. I think it might have been a requirement to pitch in this game that you just like, I don't know, like just had to have really poor command. Jose Cisnero ended the game. Glad he pitched. Glad they didn't use a position play or anything because it had been like a week and a half since Cisnero had pitched. So glad that he got a look and can keep his arm ready. Not a very efficient inning by any stretch. Got a walk in his outing as well. Still kind of looking at the walk totals, but he's the only pitcher that entered this game in a Tigers uniform and didn't give up a run. So props to him. Excuse me. Okay, let's combine the pitching. Let's just talk all pitching for the weekend, and then we'll just clump the offense all in together because that we don't have to separate the offense into 2 separate games, but the pitching we do. So moving on to Sunday, Tigers lose this one 5-3. They lost Saturday 12-2. If I didn't say the score earlier, I apologize. Joey Wentz started this game. This is probably like the lone bright spot of the weekend. I actually thought Joey Wentz looked really, really solid. 5 1/3, 4 hits, 3 earned runs, 1 walk, and 3 strikeouts. First inning of this one, his command was kind of all over the place. But I was nervous watching him. I was pretty until the game got out of hand, obviously. But I was pretty nervous because he was kind of shaky at the start. Had a 4-pitch walk there in the first inning. He only threw 3 strikes, but got out of the inning without giving up a run. It was weird. But then the second inning, he locked in and looked great. And then he was on cruise control really until the 6th when it kind of crumbled. All came crumbling down. Like the Randy Arozarena homer, he missed his location a little bit. You can see they were setting up a little more down and outside, and his was more down and like caught the plate. But I still don't think it was like a horrible pitch, and he recovered really quickly and cruised up and again until the 6th inning there. So yeah, like not a horrible performance. I think that's a kind of a solid performance, to be honest with you. Again, until the inning that he got pulled, but 29% CSW percentage, we'll take it. 11 whiffs, that's a solid performance in 5 1/3. That's a good number. The cutter looked really solid. I was happy with how the cutter looked. The fastball has some tail on it too. I really like that because it goes a different direction than the cutter. So that's awesome. I think that'll play. Has a nice tail on it. Yeah, I liked what I saw, and we'll see what kind of decision they make when Lorenzen's back. But if he has another good start, maybe that's more of a conversation. Jason Foley again, the sinker got a weak ground ball, and the slider got crushed. Like we said that on opening day too. I understand you need a secondary pitch. I get it. I know that you can't just, unless you're Mariano Rivera or like Emmanuel Clase, like you can't just have one pitch. But like the early on, at least, again, we're 2 outings into the season, but the slider not really working so far this season for Foley, and they keep bringing him in situations where they're trying to induce ground balls and then throwing the slider early, and it makes 0 sense to me. It's really pissing me off, to be honest with you. Didn't look like he was pitching super confidently, to be honest, especially like, I don't know, inheriting runners is obviously difficult and whatnot, but I don't know. I really liked Jason Foley last year. I penciled him in as somebody that I was looking forward to watching this season, and so far it's been confusing, to say the least. Alex Lang in this game looks great. Bingo. Threw strikes. If he throws strikes, I don't think there's too many relievers in baseball that are better than him. But his, same thing we said with Turnbull, to be honest with you. It's all about throwing strikes with Alex Lang. And then Chasen Shreve ends the weekend. Pretty much all of his pitches caught too much of the zone. Just not very great command. I like the stuff. I do. I do like Chasen Shreve stuff, but need to execute pitches a little bit better. Missing spots by just enough to get the bat on the ball. Okay, now we have to talk about the offense. I really don't want to, but we have to. So we will do that right after I tell y'all about our friends over at Built Bar. The Built Bar March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite Built Bar or Puff. Now is your time to go make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the churro. Y'all know what's up. I'll be voting for the churro. And to win, you'll be voting for, well, when you vote, you'll be voting for them to win. And so be sure to support your favorite bar or puff. And when you vote, you'll be entered to win a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built Bars. And not only that, but one Locked On fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to their door. You got to try Built Bar. They're the best protein bar ever. I had one earlier today. They're fantastic. They're amazing, and they're good for you. Just check all the boxes, okay? Covered in 100% real chocolate, also high protein, low sugar. They're the best in the business. All right. So run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff. Pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every single day. And so go hop in and support your pick. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. I know we're all upset and frustrated and whatnot, but I do appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. Yeah, I appreciate y'all coming back here despite what we've seen from the team so far this year. Okay, demoralizing, deflating, but we will bounce back and we will continue watching. At least I will, because I'm I don't know, an idiot, I think maybe is the word. Let's talk about the offense. That was obviously, again, dreadful, terrible, awful. Take your pick. Saturday, honestly, it just seemed like they'd only get base runners with 2 outs. Like, I didn't think Saturday was the worst approaches I've ever seen from this team in the last 12 months. Like, there have been far worse. Sunday, but we'll get into that in a second. They had 8 base runners, which, like, again, isn't amazing, but Zach Eflin's not bad. The Rays bullpen is incredible. It's not awful. There was just no rhythm. There's no flow. It's all, oh, look, there's a walk with 2 outs, and then like the bottom of the lineup is up, or oh, there's a bloop single with 2 outs, and then like the next guy strikes out looking. You know what I mean? Like there's just no flow. There's no momentum. There's no stringing together at bats or base runners. So not the worst in a vacuum. The approaches weren't terrible on Saturday, but just over the course of 9 innings, yes, terrible is the word. Sunday was the main event of the evening, as Bruce Buffer likes to say, though. That was disgusting. That was in not a good way. Like sometimes you're like Alex Lane curveball, that's disgusting. Like this was disgusting, like vomit inducing. This was not good. A 4-seam fastball had 14 called strikes against it in 7 innings. A 4-seam fastball. That is a straight pitch, relatively speaking. 14 called strikes. Jeremy Spring. The changeup had 9 whiffs, but like he only, quote unquote, had 13 whiffs in the game, and like in his entire outing. And like for a literal no-hitter, and considering that the changeup alone represented 9 of those 13, like that's not a ton. That's not a ridiculous. Like Joey Wentz had 11. Like that's not a ridiculous amount of swings and misses. But the issue was the Tigers were literally guessing at the plate. And I don't mean like, oh, you know, they looked lost. Or like, I'm not trying to give you an old adage, or like I'm not trying to be like super sarcastic or make a bad analogy. Like they were literally guessing. They had 0 clue what was coming for 6 innings. No hits, 1 walk, 12 strikeouts. Embarrassing performance. I like Jeffrey Springs. I like him a lot. I think he's going to have a big year this year. I don't think it's fair to be like, oh, look how they made a 3rd guy in a rotation look. Like that not all 3s are the same, and Jeffrey Springs is uber talented. Okay. But I'm not sure I've ever seen a Major League Baseball team take more 92-mile-an-hour fastballs down the middle through over the course of 6 innings like I did on Sunday. That was remarkable. Remarkable. And when they, like, it truly was, we kind of talked about a little bit within the World Baseball Classic, like when USA played Japan, right? Like it was a lot of either fastballs at the knees or splitters that went low, and they just kept the hitters off balance. It was rather similar. Like every single called strike was either a fastball down the middle or like low, but like left, right down the middle, but low, or it was a changeup that was not particularly close to the strike zone that they swung and missed at. And that's what it was for 6 innings. No hit through 6, 3 base runners total in the game. Okay. That's like all what else am I supposed to say about the offense? I'm not going to break down each player individually for Sunday because all the approaches were the same. Everyone looked the same. Everyone struck out, I'm pretty sure. Like, you got no hit through 2/3 of the game. Everyone was kind of in the same boat, believe it or not. All right. General observations besides the offense has looked no different. Okay. That's not allowed to be a general observation. We're removing it. Other observations. Much sunnier over here when you ignore in the reality that I've placed myself in where the Tigers offense doesn't exist to me. I have 2. Okay. One is the bullpen. This bullpen is going to be way worse than last season. And I think that's clear already. If it wasn't honestly painfully obvious, like in January, it certainly is now. They they had a legitimate 4-headed monster last year. They did. And they were a rather good bullpen because of it. And they replaced those 4 arms outside of Alex Lang with, well, Alex Lang, you could have even argued was a 5 last year of that bullpen. Yeah. A lot of good relievers in that arm barn last year. And they replaced their 4 best relievers last season with some dudes that have had little to no, in some cases, MLB experience over the last like 2 years. Garrett Hill has very little experience. Chasen Shreve has been kind of like a journeyman where he's had like some good years, but some not so great years. And, the last 2 years have been kind of up and down. Winginter hasn't played a major league game in years. So you're talking about an overhaul in the pen. And so I still like the upside with some of them. I like the fact that they're taking a chance and kind of just have this revolving door. I think a ton of people are going to be relievers for the Tigers this year. You and I might be relievers for the Tigers at some point. They're just going to throw a bunch of names back there and see what sticks. But it's certainly going to be a much different pen this year. I think that's one thing that's going to be painfully obvious rather early on, especially in this very, very rough first 6 weeks schedule-wise. The other one is I'm planting my flag now that Jake Rogers is going to start more games behind the plate than Eric Haas this year. I kind of have been teasing that all spring, and I think I'm just going to ride with it at this point. It was night and day, like night and day, the defensive and game calling and pitch receiving behind the plate when Rogers was back there on Sunday than the previous 2 days when it was Eric Haas. I'm pretty sold on this at this point. And Haas brings value to a baseball team. I'm not trying to say that he should be like off the team or that he's terrible or anything. It's just his value mostly comes from in the batter's box. And so I am curious to see, I want that first lineup of the year where they're both in it. I want that first, whether Haas is DHing or he's in left field or whatever they decide to do. That's what I'm excited for and I'm kind of watching for at this point. But I'm rather convinced that Rogers is going to play more games behind the plate. And if he doesn't, something has either gone wrong with one or the two of them, or I'm just going to adamantly disagree with the fact that he's not, and I'm going to take a complaint up with management. Like that's kind of where I stand. I strongly believe that he probably deserves to be back there more times than Haas does at this point. So yeah, there you go. There are 2 takeaways from the weekend that aren't about how bad the offense is because we kind of already talked about that. Other news and notes, Edwin Ucita was claimed off of waivers by the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was DFA'd when he was removed from the 40-man roster to make room for some players, some of the relievers and whatnot. So he is no longer part of the organization, was kind of in the running there early on in the spring for a bullpen job, didn't get it. Minor league rosters were released over the weekend. AAA season started as well. So Job, Pacheco, Roberto Campos, and Young, first-round pick from last year, all start off in West Michigan, high single A together. That'll be a fun roster. Wilmer Flores, Colt Keith, and Ty Madden all start out in double A. I think Wilmer Flores and Colt Keith are both like pretty – like if Wilmer Flores has 2 or 3 good starts, it might only even take that for him to get to Toledo. And Colt Keith, I think if he starts out, a hot month or 2, he could probably be in the same boat. Ty Madden's got some stuff to work on, some fastball adjustments he's got to make before that, but we'll see. And then AAA is really just it kind of feels like practice squatty, right? Like I just said squatty, but like it kind of feels like a practice squad. You know what I mean? Like it's just all the dudes that just missed out on the major league roster are kind of in AAA. It's not full of a ton of prospects or anything. Like Justin Henry Malloy's down there, but and Meadows and whatnot. But again, like they're kind of in that boat. It's just really the dudes on the 40-man that just missed the major league roster is kind of what that's full of. I think that's it. Like AJ Hinch quote, it was a bad weekend. And quote, we've got to do a lot better in a lot of areas if we want to play competitive baseball. Ain't that the truth? All right. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. For your next listen, check on Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Try to win your league, unlike the Tigers, by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everyone. We got through it. That is an episode from heck right there. Yeah, I apologize for the I don't know if I got a little too like monotony or like whatever. I'm very frustrated as I know all of y'all are as well. We'll see, but I'm tired of we'll see, and I know that everyone's tired of we'll see, and that's the frustrating part about this. So. Houston next, really quickly. I guess I wanted to try to talk about other teams a little bit more. I mean, 0-6, staring right back at you. That's pretty much what I have to say. And again, like I said earlier, kind of in my rambling and rant at the beginning of the show, like we're 3 games in, and we're already at a point where people are like sitting cross-armed and they're like, prove me wrong. And like you have every right to do that. Because it's been a long time since you've been proven wrong. So, yeah, like be as stingy about it as you want. This team deserves it. They don't deserve the like glass half full, like, oh, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. It's been awful. Okay, and look, like they go on a heater. They take 2 of 3 from Houston. They win the home opener. Like you're talking about a much different reaction. We go, okay, thank goodness we were proven wrong, right? If they even won one of these Rays games in like commanding fashion and it didn't look like an accident that they won like it did so many times last year, I'd be coming on here and be like, all right, like 2 of these games were awful, but look at this one. This is, this was a nice victory. We have to be proven wrong. They have to prove the fan base wrong that this year is going to be any different from last year. And we're a weekend in and they have yet to do it. That's all. All right. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. We're trying to spread peace and love still doing so. I appreciate all of y'all. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, baby. You know the drill. I already said peace and love, going to therapy's dope. Okay, let's end this. See y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.